Good evening. Today's January 24th, 2019. The Albuquerque Bernalillo County Government Commission meeting will come to order. Councilor Benton is excused this evening. First on the agenda is that we will have a moment of silence led by the Pledge of Allegiance by our new Commissioner, Charlene Piscotti. And with that, I actually want to welcome the Commissioner to the ABCGC. It's a hard acronym, but you'll get used to it. It's taken me only 5 years now. So welcome aboard. Next item is item 2, approval of the minutes. Are there any changes to the meeting minutes? Do I have a motion? Do I have a motion for the approval? There's a motion by Commissioner O'Malley and Councilor Harris. All those in favor say yes. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Do I have a motion for the September 15, 2018 minutes?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second for approval of the November 15, 2018 minutes. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Motion passes. We are now on item 3, public comment. We have one speaker this evening. There will be a 2-minute time limit. The light on the podium will be green for the first minute and a half. Then the bell will ring and the light will turn yellow, indicating you have 30 seconds remaining to wrap up your comments. At 2 minutes, the light will turn red and ring to indicate your time is up. Our first and only speaker is Mr. Tad Naminsky this evening.
Can you give me overhead? Thank you. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. My name is Ted Nemiski. Well, that is interesting overhead, right? Who's the picture? Council Clarissa Pena, right? On the board of YDI. Right. Oh, look at who's sitting to her. Mr. Gonzaga. I believe it's your wife. She's your secretary. Her secretary. Okay, very interesting group of people. Now you can put a one and one together. You get answer where I'm coming from. Well. So anyway, let's go to the issue on mental health. These days, living in downtown area, or maybe that's conflict of interest. So anyway, yes, that's Clarissa Pena, also city council, and also employee YDI, and also right here, board chairperson. Very interesting, very busy woman. I won't be able to say what I plan to say. No, not enough time. But it is large problem in downtown area with homeless people, mental homeless people, gang, criminal on the bus, everywhere, graffiti all over, etc., etc. Well, Clarissa Pena works in one institution. No.
Thank you, Mr. Naminsky. Commissioner O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to address this, I don't know what this was supposed to be, some sort of comparison, or it was supposed to allude to something, conflict of interest or whatever, which I find very, very disturbing. I don't like that sort of thing, and I don't think it's to make those kind of statements and allude to something that is amiss or a conflict of interest without, there's no, any substance associated with this at all. YDI is an organization that has been in existence for a long time, and it is a well-respected organization and has been. Both Councillor Pena and Commissioner Quesada have worked for that organization. They no longer work for that organization. So I just want to make that statement. Thank you.
That's perfect. I think also did your
Thank you, Mr. Naminsky. Appreciate it. And just for the record, I have not been with YDI for several years. So next item, we have item number 4, new business. Item A, selection of the chair. As you know, we have alternating chairs from the city and the county, and this year it is the county's turn. So at this time, I will take nominations. Commissioner O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to nominate Commissioner Stephen Quesada for chair.
There's a motion and a second for Commissioner Quesada. Are there any other nominations? And I don't know if the official rule is, I know you're supposed to say it 3 times. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing no other nominations, you are approved. You are selected the new chair by proclamation, by acclamation. Yeah. Congratulations.
I think I got
So-
bamboozled. So, Madam Chair, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think this is a very important committee, and I think we go over a lot of things here, and, you know, this is where I think our 2 government entities have a real opportunity to work together and get some really great things done. So I appreciate it, and I'm honored to serve. I was just joking before.
Well, with that, Commissioner, at this time, we can actually switch, or I can complete the meeting. It's up to you. Did you want to? Okay. Well, you know what? Why don't we do this? Why don't we just switch these,
Okay.
and then it'll be much easier.
Okay.
So let me tell you where we're at.
Okay, so we will be moving on to the second part of the elections. So we need I will take a nomination for vice chair. Do I have?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Davis.
Okay, I have a motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for Councilor Davis. Do I have any other nominations? I have no other nominations. Okay, one more time. No more, no nominations. All right, so, yeah, congratulations, Councilor Davis. Yeah, as vice chair. I appreciate it. Thanks. Okay, and then we will have, so we need to approve, let's see, let me see where we're at.
The 2, yeah.
So, okay, item C, approve reasonable notice of meetings for calendar year 2019.
Yara will explain.
Yeah. Okay, and Stephanie Yara.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members, under the New Mexico Open Meetings Act, this body is required to pass a resolution every year regarding a reasonable notice of meetings. So this would just continue the current practice. The meetings need to be noticed at least 72 hours in advance. It does prescribe 5 days if possible. This body has to hold a meeting at least once every quarter. And those notices must be posted in this building on the first floor and also be sent to a publication like the Albuquerque Journal. The meeting notice is met if those notices include the date, time of the meeting, and the agenda. So.
Okay, so do I have a motion? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Hart Stebbins.
I just have a question. So there would be the requirement that the agenda would be published 72 hours ahead. Can we add that any documents that are relevant to the items on the agenda also be published and sent to committee members? I think we've done that at the county, most of the boards that we all serve on it, at Mr. Cog, just so we have the opportunity to at least see the documents and review them before we get here. So if we could, I would propose that we would add that to this meeting notice. I don't know if we have to vote on that or if I can just request it.
So would we vote on the amendment to that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you can either, she can move that as an amendment to the bill, or we can agree to do that offline. So.
Or you just do it administratively, you think?
I'll just move that we make that change so that notice of meetings and supporting documents shall be available 5 days prior to the meeting and at least 72 hours in advance. So that's at the beginning of Section 2.
All right, so I got a motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor for the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So the amendment passes. So now we'll go back to the item R19-1, which was, had a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. We will go now to item D, approval of the 2019 meeting schedule. Ms. Yara.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members. So this schedule just sets out what we anticipate to be the meetings, monthly meetings for this body. Normally, they're going to be held the last Thursday of every month. The schedule is in your packet if you have any specific questions.
Do we have any questions, comments? I move for approval. Second. I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. We will move on to item E, study of the future regional indoor youth sports facility presentation. Commissioner Hart Stebbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think when we first proposed this item, there was a lot less information, I think, available to both the City Council and the County Commission about what has been proposed as far as a regional sports complex. And I think there's more information now, but I think this is a good opportunity for us to hear from some members of the county's Youth Sports Commission about the planning that went into this, the reason behind this proposal, and educate us a little bit and give us the opportunity to ask questions. So with that, I want to just welcome our guests.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name's Bob Cleval. I want to give you a brief background of the Bernalillo County Sports Commission so we can kind of get up to date on how we got to this point. In 2013, Senate Memorial 97 created a task force to improve and enhance youth sports in New Mexico. Senate Memorial 84, the very next year, continued that work. So in 2014, our group, even though we had an offer from the governor at that time to create a statewide youth sports commission, all our members felt we needed to stay local with the city, with the county, tri-county. At that time, a couple of our members, including myself, went to Commissioner Hart Stebbins and asked what her thoughts were on this idea, and she thought it was a good idea and brought it in front of her other members, and it was created through resolution in August of 2014. So shortly after our work on Senate Memorial 84, we began as a sports commission. Our first meeting after the Bernalillo County Sports Commission was adopted was in December, and during that time, the 19-member board was through different processes to fill the needs. Each of the commissioners all had a representative either from their district or somebody involved in youth sports, the city, the county, APS, health, business community, and several of the sports were all represented. So our 19-member group met, and it was good to get all these sports people together who never talked. Now they were able to talk and prioritize and look at the needs, and many of them had the same common denominators: not enough places to play, places to practice, health issues, safety issues. So pretty much at that time, we started to put together our subcommittees. We've got 4 subcommittees that are meeting regularly, and I'll run through them real quick before I turn this over to Jim. Our health committee is led by Dr. Rick Campbell, a neuropsychologist at UNM. He immediately conducted a survey with youth sports organizations on health issues, safety issues. He was also a lead witness with Dr. From the Lobos, McGee. Okay. Anyway, for the brain injury concussion protocols. Another subcommittee had to do with the certifications that the county passed through resolution, and that is to look at the basic minimums for all youth sports organizations when it comes to concussions and background checks, everything to make it better for our kids. We have another subcommittee chaired by Dr. Lindsay Smart from UNM that has to do with youth enrollment in sports. When we did our state of the sport, we found that all these sports are losing participants. We needed to find out why. So at that time, it was decided to put together a survey. We've just got it approved through APS and UNM to use their parents and students in a survey, and we'll get that information to you guys once we get that information out. And Chairman, I believe you heard from her when when you were at our meeting in December. And lastly, the facilities subcommittee that was adopted 4 years ago, and Jim Tilley has taken that on, and he's done a heck of a job to get us exactly where we are today. So I'm sorry I took up a couple minutes, because it's going to take him probably about 8 or 10. So thank you, and we'll answer any questions at any time.
I don't usually have a problem being heard, so hope this works. Mr. Chairman, congratulations. Madam former Chairman, also congratulations. Commissioners, councilors. I'm Jim Tilley. I'm Vice Chair of the Youth Sports Commission, and I'm also the Chairman of the Indoor-Outdoor Sports Complex Steering Committee. I want to talk for just a few minutes about a couple of groups here in town that have been working pretty steadily, and I want to talk to you about their work, and I hope then to talk about a piece of metro area synergy that I hope you'll find very enticing. 3 years ago, after years of study, the Youth Sports Commission identified a scarcity of indoor sports facilities as the #1 facility issue in the metro area. Local schools used to be, Local schools used to be the center of sports activity, but we've grown away from that model for a variety of reasons. Quite simply, the schools don't host the number of sports activities that they used to host. The facilities are either not available or they become too expensive. And the community and private enterprise have been unable to keep up with the change, especially for the indoor sports. So we find ourselves in a situation today where participation in youth indoor sports is essentially rationed by the cost and availability of facilities. Every youth basketball league limits the number of teams will accept based on court space. Wrestling has become a high school feeder program, and volleyball, indoor soccer, martial arts, gymnastics have all become completely privatized, almost completely privatized. And the scarcity is growing worse by the year. So in 2016, the Youth Sports Commission formed a committee to address those issues. And that committee interviewed a wide variety of stakeholders in a wide variety of indoor sports, and the findings were not particularly surprising. Indoor sports opportunities are diminishing. The cost to use indoor facilities is increasing. Elite youth athletes must undertake substantial expense to travel to find appropriate competition. Because of the first three, player development is being stifled, and importantly, Albuquerque, with limited facilities, has a tough time competing for major sports events. So after about 6 months of study, the Indoor Facilities Committee identified goals for a new regional indoor sports complex. It should be state-of-the-art. It should be able to host a wide variety of events in the same space. It should serve the needs of the local sports community and be available to that community on a scheduled basis. But it should also generate tourism opportunities, and it should have a high visibility regionally and nationally. In the summer of 2017, the Commission formed a steering committee to create a feasibility study and begin the discussion of how to get this ball rolling. The Bernalillo County contracted the Albuquerque firm of Decker Parrott Sabatini for the study. And the feasibility study, which you have in front of you, is broken down into several sections. And I'm just going to hit the highlights very, very quickly. It's 100 pages of analysis, methodology, and supporting appendices. In the precedent analysis, there's an examination of 5 facilities in the western United States that vary in size and operational and financing models. In the market analysis, we concluded that an indoor facility is needed, that it would help Albuquerque compete for events with strong tourism potential, and that the local market segments served by an indoor facility are growing. The local segment is growing. In the site comparison analysis, we examined 2 possible locations, 98th Street by Nucinda Community Stadium and Mesa del Sol. We looked at a variety of factors, including characteristics of the immediate service areas as shown by the circles. And please note on this list of factors that we added synergy at the bottom. The site comparison analysis has become very important in the last few weeks, and I will address that at the end of the presentation. In the programming analysis, we examined several sizes, but recommended a phased approach to size and a phase 1 of 115,000 square feet that would hold 12 basketball courts, or 6 futsal courts, or 24 volleyball courts in the same space, with a plan in place to increase the size of the facility in phase 2. We also included a variety of economic analyses. The 12 basketball court facility is estimated to cost about $25 million. Our projections show that as a mature facility, operating revenues will recover 86% of operating costs. And it's worth emphasizing here that we're not advocating setting up a low-key community center style of management. We're talking about a facility that should be heavily staffed, heavily marketed, and heavily programmed. We also looked at the economic benefits of tourism generated by important sports events. For example, the youth soccer Far West Regionals bring over 60,000 visitor days and $5 million in first spent dollars in 1 week. Volleyball, futsal, and basketball have the same kind of tourism potential, and the one-off events like regional and national Golden Gloves can be truly huge. We also examined a variety of management models. So that's an overview of the facility feasibility study, and you can get in touch with any of us that were on that committee if you have specific questions on how we arrived at that information. But separately, in the last few months, a different group in the city has been pursuing construction of a multi-sport outdoor facility at Mesa del Sol that would support 30 soccer or football fields, as well as cricket, lacrosse, field hockey, and other outdoor events. Much of the infrastructure to support those fields is available or is already in place. Now, you remember on the site comparison analysis for the indoor facility that we included the word synergy. As members of the 2 committees, the indoor committee and the outdoor committee, began to meet together, a couple of things became very clear very quickly. First, these facilities should be built together and integrated. With a regional indoor sports complex as the anchor to a larger multi-purpose sports complex, we could host a wide variety of indoor and outdoor events. The synergy that the 2 projects bring to each other is enormous. A multifunctional indoor-outdoor facility creates a compelling tourism potential. It would be very enticing to a wide variety of national and regional event planners. Secondly, Mesa del Sol is ready right now for this facility. It's going to take about 150 plus minimum contiguous acres to build this, and that acreage is not available at the west side site. The Mesa del Sol site also offers a clear marketing advantage. Near flight patterns and highly visible from the air, and in close proximity to the airport and downtown, the location would quickly gain notoriety in the national sports community. It would instantly be important and highly visible regionally and nationally. And finally, the third obvious thing that became clear, the impact on local sports as a combined entity would be dramatic. The 2 facilities side by side add functionality and dynamism to each other, and that can only benefit our local children. So this is a depiction of a possible layout for a combined indoor facility with 30-field multi-sport complex at Mesa del Sol. As a quick side overview, this is 187 acres, so this is larger than what we think is the minimum that you would have to build it. If you look at that, the amphitheater is in the upper left corner. The existing fields are in the upper right-hand corner. The whole complex is at the corner of University Boulevard and Bobby Foster, and you can see the depiction of the regional indoor soccer complex in the southeast corner, surrounded by the new fields. So the merging of the two projects at Mesa del Sol provides the opportunity for a rare synergy between a unique and useful outdoor space and a unique and useful indoor space. Building the two together improves the financial impact for the city, it lowers the total cost, and it begins the process of putting a facility together that can compete with Denver, Dallas, and Phoenix for major youth sports events, and not just regionally. This is a project that could instantly become iconic in the national sports landscape. The number of national class indoor facilities that are integrated into a national class outdoor facility is tiny. I myself, in 35 years in the business, I've only been to one, and that's Walt Disney World in Orlando. So much as Pope Joy Hall or the Isleta Amphitheater or the Bloom Fiesta are a lure to the best shows and the best pilots, an iconic facility, a great outdoor facility integrated with a great indoor facility, will draw the best of the best to Albuquerque in several sports. If the facility is regionally and nationally acclaimed, more and better groups will want to visit it. It will become a coveted destination for events that are looking for a classy, impressive venue. Okay, so these are the recommendations from the Youth Sports Committee and the Steering Committee. We're asking the city, the county, and the developer, an entirely different kind of synergy, to build a 115,000 square foot facility with a plan in place to build a larger facility as soon as possible. To build it at Mesa del Sol in conjunction with a 30-field outdoor soccer, football, multi-purpose complex that could host a wide variety of outdoor sports. And to pursue a public-private partnership for management that's consistent with the goals of the Youth Sports Commission. And then finally, this is the phasing we're recommending. Phase 1's underway. A great deal of the work is already planned and the funds are available. Phase 2, as soon as possible, get 9 new outdoor fields completed and get the plans drawn for the indoor facility. Phase 3, build the 115,000 square foot facility to house 12 basketball courts, 6 futsal courts, or 24 volleyball courts. Phase 4, build 15 more outdoor fields as soon as possible. And finally, Phase 5, double the size of the indoor facility. Commissioners, councilors, as a combined indoor-outdoor complex, this is a game changer for Metro sports. It's a game changer for tourism, and it's a game changer for our children. Thanks for your time and consideration. If you've got any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions? Councilor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, it's a technical question. I was looking at on page 7, the census or demographic summary.
Page
And,
7.
And it's just kind of interesting because first, the numbers kind of came off the page because it looks like the ratio between Anglos and Hispanics is in Albuquerque, but then.
In the appendices, sir?
Pardon me?
In the appendices?
Oh, that's page 7. Oh, yeah, it probably is in the
I'm
appendices.
afraid there's 2 page 7s.
Yeah, I think it's in the
we found it.
appendices.
I found it.
Okay. But then I realized that obviously people who are filling this out or the surveys or whatever allow people to fill out more than one category. Because when you add all these up, in the ethnicity, 2017, Hispanic, white, black, American Indian, Asian, Pacific Islander, other, multiple. When you add all those numbers up, it comes up to 149%. So, so I'm guessing that the reason why the white versus Hispanic is a little bit different than I'm used to seeing is because a lot of people were probably self-identifying as both?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That question did come up, and your answer's spot on.
Okay, thanks.
Any more comments?
I'd just like to make a comment that I think this is a really exciting project with a lot of potential, and I appreciate all the research and homework you've done on it. It seems like you're being very thorough, so I appreciate that, and I look forward to your progress.
Thank you. We look forward to our progress, too.
Councilor?
Thanks. I just want to add, this has been a great process, and it's been long overdue and a lot of public input, and I think we're finally at a place where we can all sort of point our arrows in the same direction. But to me, this process, particularly in the last sort of year or so, looking at multiple sites, really helped us identify that this won't still solve all of our local need, even though it'll be, I'm certain, a regional and a national draw. The city's after-school and summer programs showed real potential this year with exponential growth and still didn't accommodate everything. I know we've been talking internally at the city about how to add more facilities and fields and things. And this process, to me, also helped us identify that the west side still has facilities needs in terms of finding West Side facilities, whether it's additional soccer fields or other sports activities that are located in near those neighborhoods too. And I just want us, sort of as a group here, to acknowledge that as we, I think, have sort of moved forward on settling on the Mesa del Sol sort of site and moving forward together on that, we shouldn't leave our West Side folks, those other regional or neighborhood projects out, because 30 Field still doesn't accomplish everything we need regionally, and we ought to be working in parallel on both those neighborhood pieces as well. And I think together we've shown a good willingness to do that, and should continue with the legislature as well this year.
Mr. Chairman, could I put in a quick plug also? Counselor, you stated that very well. I think one of the things that just jumps off the page as we went through this process is how, just exactly how limiting the indoor facilities specifically are becoming. And so I would encourage, you all have a very tough job, both the commission and the council, but I would encourage you not to forget that that we need indoor facilities very badly also. And I'm an outdoor sports guy, so I sort of crossed over on this one.
All right. All right, thank you. Any more comments? No? Okay, thank you so much.
You bet.
We appreciate it. We'll move on to item F, presentation by Andrew Lippman regarding a comprehensive approach to homelessness and the creation of a board of homelessnesses.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, and Councilors, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. I got involved in the issue of homelessness as the Director of Government Affairs for the Four Hills Village Association after attending an East Gateway Coalition meeting concerning the proposed tiny homes project. At that time, the proposed location was along Central in the East Gateway area, and the various neighborhood associations in the area, along with District 9 Councilor Don Harris, opposed the tiny homes project in those locations. I understand the project has since relocated to Zuni, next to the Albuquerque Indian Center. The tiny homes project raised my concern and interest about the problem of homelessness. So I did some research about what might be done to assist the homeless here in Albuquerque. In the process of researching the problem of homelessness, I came across the concept of a homeless campus. At that time, I read about the homeless campus locations in San Antonio, Las Vegas, and Phoenix. And I know some of the elected officials and city staff have been to the center in San Antonio. I also know from press stories that the Greater Albuquerque Business Alliance is working on such a project. The keys to success for any project are two very important things: sufficient funding to build and maintain the project, and broad-based community-wide support. With those things in place, the project will have the best chance of success. The challenge with what we are doing now is that it's piecemeal. A small housing project here for 40 people, a health center somewhere else, meal sites, motel vouchers. This is repeated all over Albuquerque. Yet today, I still see homeless folks soliciting at many major intersections around the city, including shopping centers. In some places, you can see homeless encampments with tents and lean-tos. This is a very big and complex problem. I must admit that I do favor the campus idea, and I believe what is needed for success is a much larger effort than what we are doing now. I am aware of the Mayor's Homeless Advisory Council, but I believe we may need a working task force or board. The Advisory Council is 40 people, and it's too large a group to get anything done. I don't know who's on it. A task force or board must include representatives from all of the government entities: city, county, state, and federal government. All of these government entities have funding for homelessness, plus the business community like the Greater Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce and the Greater Albuquerque Business Alliance folks. Finally, the University of New Mexico, plus all of the major agencies and nonprofits who are already providing services. With a working task force or board, whatever you want to call it, including all of these entities, whatever project they decide will have broad community support and sufficient funding from government and business resources. I believe we need to think big to address a problem like homelessness. According to HUD, approximately 550,000 people nationwide go homeless every night. And according to the City Behavioral Health Study, around 1,318 folks here in Albuquerque go homeless nightly. We may need $75 to $100 million. If the project is large enough and creative enough, I believe we can attract and very possibly secure grants from large foundations or endowments. Think Rockefeller Foundation, Ford Foundation, Gates Foundation. Homelessness is a problem all over the United States. Homeless people are not all the same. Some are in need of mental health services. Some are drug addicts. Some are veterans with PTSD. Some are simply folks who are out of work and out of money. That's why a central center is desirable, because they then need to go somewhere else for medical treatment, meals, job training, or housing. Regardless of what the final project turns out to be, with all of the stakeholders involved, the result will be a better solution to homelessness in Albuquerque. If Albuquerque can produce a state-of-the-art science and technology center, why not a model homeless campus project? I believe it's possible, and I'm willing to help. I'll answer any questions.
Councilor Harris.
Thank you, and Mr. Lippman is my constituent in Fort Hills, and before I talk about why you're here tonight, Mr. Lippman, as you said, is the Government Affairs Director for the Fort Hills Village Association, and there was a snafu with Commissioner Biscotti in that, in terms of the communication of getting her to the meeting on Saturday, so we need to figure that out. And both of us have a,
Okay.
because Commissioner Biscotti also represents Fort Hills on the county
Right.
commission. So let's sort that out, and also we both have to be in Embudo Canyon on the same day, so that we're going to have to juggle things. So maybe we can get Bonnie involved and her constituent services person, Joe Noriega, and maybe I see that Julie and Baca. Maybe she can you give Mr. Lippman contact information for the commissioner? Okay, but so getting that out of the way, I wanted to say that because I'd forget if we start talking about the substance of all this.
Okay.
But anyway, I agree with you, and the polling shows
It's
that.
this Saturday, by the way.
Yeah, I know, it's fast coming up. So, I think, polling shows that this is something that crosses party lines, and I think there's really getting a lot of energy in our society to get something like this done. The Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Albuquerque is here up on the dais with us. Maybe she has some comments, but I know the mayor is really trying to do a big push to get this done. We're up in Santa Fe. And I think this would be a good body to start, maybe getting legislation to at least get the city and county together, and maybe this could be a place to start staffing some sort of a commissioner task force like that. So thank you for bringing this to our attention, and I think we're going to get after it.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner, Councilor,
I think it's interesting that that what you're proposing, Mr. Limbus, which is a large campus, we couldn't get, people were saying not in my backyard for a small-scale tiny home village. I can't imagine where you would locate a campus like this unless it was on the outskirts of town, because I think that people would object to that. I just want to say a couple of things. There were two bond issues to fund a tiny home village, and they passed strongly in the county. So we did ask the public about what they thought, and they knew that it was for that. It was intentional to do a neighborhood scale model for housing folks who are homeless, because we wanted to be in a neighborhood so that it has support systems around it, so people can find a job, so the neighborhood can integrate and communicate with the folks and vice versa. So it has those kind of support systems. So I believe that that was the point. I have real concerns with large campus models because they're large campus models. And I don't like the idea of warehousing people. And typically these models are on the outskirts of town because people don't want them in their neighborhoods because they're large scale. They don't fit in a neighborhood. I think there's a lot of different approaches for folks because, as you mentioned, people are are homeless for a number of reasons. There's all kinds of situations, which is why we have we've got a 42-unit, what is that called, supportive housing project that we're doing downtown. The Bernalillo County is looking to build another one, smaller, same kind of scale, 42 units, and focusing on veterans. And I think that we're sort of like looking for a solution, and I think the approach is that we have to consider that if we really want people to be integrated into a community, we have to accept them into the community and go to where they are and address their situation where they are. Those are my comments about it. I'm very pleased that we were able to get the support we needed to put the pilot project where it is, and we've got the support of the community. But again, that's my concern, is that we're basically saying we have to do things to integrate people back into the community who have been disenfranchised without having a home, and we put them outside of the community. And then we start to bus them back and forth, and they're still in this situation where they are homeless. They don't, they're in shelters. And again, I still think, I'm not saying that we don't need the shelter model. I think we need a lot of different things, a lot of different models. But this idea of having this one central campus, I have some strong concerns about that. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Malley, have you been to the Haven for Hope in San Antonio?
I haven't visited San Antonio, but I'm aware of their project. And it's
looked at
easy
their
to look
website,
up.
brochure?
Yes, absolutely I have. Yes.
Okay. Let me comment on some of the things that you said. You're quite right. A lot of these.
I'm not going to argue with you.
What? Oh,
Okay.
okay, all right. That's okay. Thank you. She was just making a comment and a statement.
Okay.
So I appreciate that. Any more comments? Yeah.
I have a
Oh, I'm sorry. And then we'll go to commissioners.
Thank you, Chairman Casetta. And thank you, Mr. Littman. I believe that Carol Pierce from our department and some of the folks who work within the Housing and Homelessness Division in Family Community Services have met with you. And thank you for recognizing that we put together a Homeless Advisory Council. It does have representatives of the county, the city, the state, the faith-based community, the schools, the university. And although it has a large plenary, it's broken into working groups. I believe you've been invited to participate in one of those working groups, and that invitation remains open to you or to Councilor Harris or to any members of the commission who are interested in participating. We do feel that having sort of a big tent, but breaking it down into small working groups that are more nimble is the approach to doing this. So I completely agree with your presentation, and I just would say that we're already doing it. And since we're already kind of far along, we'd just like to integrate anyone who feels like they haven't been able to participate in that in the existing model. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Piscotti.
And thank you, because that was one of the questions I wanted to ask, if there were public working groups open to the public on this, on the city side. I know on the county side, under the Behavioral Health Initiative, we had the Supportive Housing Subcommittee. And do those still meet? Is that still something available for the public to attend?
I think Katrina Holtram could probably answer that question, if you would repeat the question for her. Please. It's going to take her a minute. I don't know what she did to her foot.
Okay, yeah, the question was, I know that on the county side, there was a Supportive Housing Subcommittee. Does that still meet? Is it open to the public?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, yes, they are still meeting. They are meeting quarterly at this point, yes. And they are open to the public as well.
And when and where? Is there a specific day, time that it meets?
Super secret, top squirrely, but it is on our website. So it's on Bernalillo County's website and under DBHS and the Bernalillo Behavioral Health Initiative. All of our meetings are public, and I think we have our meeting coming up next month, but we can certainly get that information to you so that we can share the information out to everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Katrina. Thank you. Any more comments? Yeah, as we all know, this is a huge problem. It's not, I think even in his comments when he broke down, the different reasons why, and looking from behavioral health to our our veterans, and just some people being down on their luck, and we know that, and so through the county, when we've looked at behavioral health, we know that it's a big wide net, and we've spent, and I give you a lot of credit, Katrina, and also Commissioner Hart Stebbins have done a lot of work on trying to identify where the holes are in that net, so that the money that we're using, we're trying to get the best bang for the buck. And so we've identified that not everybody's the same, and it's different. And you'll find, even if you put a board together, I think you'll find that even each district of Albuquerque, from the South Valley to the Northeast Heights, to the Southwest Mesa, again, there'll be variables there that will dictate how and what kind of services you're going to be providing. But I'd like to thank you for even taking the step to getting involved, and I appreciate the research that you did and the homework that you did. And I think that this is conversations that we will continue to keep having. And I think we're all very optimistic that we have the ability to put a big dent in our homeless problem here in Albuquerque. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Okay. So now we will go on to item G, presentation of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Commissioner Hart Stebbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So many of us on the dais here serve on the Metropolitan Transportation Board and have for a long time, so we are regularly updated on the progress of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And but it, as I've talked with the staff at the Metropolitan Transportation Board, it's clear that the public often doesn't really have an opportunity to participate in this planning process. And so I just invited Dave so that those of us on this board who have not had the opportunity to serve on the Metropolitan Transportation Board can get a sense of what is happening. We are in the process of updating or putting together the Connections 2040 plan, which is how local governments decide what the priorities are for transportation dollars. So I want to thank Stephen and Dave for being here and giving us an opportunity to learn a little bit more.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to appear before the commission here. And I just want to introduce, I'm Dave Piniella. I'm the MPO administrator at the Mid-Region Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is a division of the Mid-Region Council of Governments. This is Steve Montiel. He's a senior transportation analyst and the Transportation Improvement Program coordinator. Just want to talk to you a little bit about the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So what I want to talk about is a little bit about the process and how we develop it and what you can expect to hear from us in the next year. For those of you who are not familiar with it, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan is a federally mandated document that embraces the federally mandated 3C process, the 3 C's being continuous, cooperative, and comprehensive planning. Our focus is transportation planning, and it is the guiding document that decides which projects get funded with federal transportation dollars in the metropolitan area. All metropolitan areas in the country are mandated to have a metropolitan planning organization and a corresponding metropolitan transportation plan. Wait, we're having a little difficulty moving along.
There's multiple versions of this. Make sure we have the right one. There we go.
Okay, keep going to the next one. Okay, so a couple of things here. First of all, a Metropolitan Transportation Plan is a long-range plan. The federal government mandates that we look 20 years into the future. Our current MTP is updated every 5 years. For those of you who have been around on transportation planning prior to this particular MTP, we used to go every 4 years, but because, fortunately, our region is no longer in nonconformity for carbon monoxide, we're in full compliance, we now can go to a 5-year update schedule. So that is what we've done. Again, the long-range plans do cover a 20-year period. Excuse me. What does the MTP do? It establishes the goals for transportation planning in the metropolitan area. It must be fiscally constrained and incorporates all modes of transportation. When I talk about the federal funding coming into the metropolitan area, I'm talking about funds for highways, for transit, for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. It is a very comprehensive plan. When I say that the plan has to be fiscally constrained, I'll get into that in just a minute. Let's go ahead, next one. We have completed already, here's the time frame, what you can expect to hear from us. We have completed 3 public kickoff meetings and an agency kickoff meeting, and we have made a similar presentation to this to the Metropolitan Transportation Board. Those public meetings were done in November of the past year, along with the agency kickoff. Our next big step is to put together the financial plan, which I'll talk about in a moment, the financial plan for the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and solicit from every member government which transportation projects they would like to see included in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. We expect to have a first draft of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan in the end of 2019, probably around November. Then we will get into the final draft into spring of 2020 with a formal public comment. We'll have a couple other public involvement sessions, but then we have a federally mandated formal public comment period in April with board approval by the Metropolitan Transportation Board in April or May of 2020. We've also, with Ms. Baca, I've also scheduled a tentative time coming back to this commission to present to you what our first draft of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan would look like. So that way we're making sure we're keeping you up to date on what that plan would be. Okay. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Mr. COG or the MPO, be prepared. Acronyms are us. I'm telling you that right now. And spreadsheets. So the Metropolitan Transportation Board, or the MTB, is the policy board that governs the MPO. We work for the MPO. We do what the MPO directs us to with the MTB. The policy board is made up of elected officials from the city, the county, Rio Rancho, down to Valencia County, Pueblo tribal governors or council members, and other agency staff and other agency decision makers, such as the New Mexico Department of Transportation. Besides the MTB, there are 2 main committees. The TCC, there's an acronym for you, which is the Transportation Coordinating Committee. That is one of the main committees that reports to the Metropolitan Transportation Board. Pretty much all the other committees funnel into the TCC. The TCC is made up of some of your higher level agency staff or their representatives. One of the other main committees is the TPTG, Transportation Program Technical Group, which does a lot of the lion's share of managing the current federally funded projects. And I will get into that another time. That could be a whole different discussion. But the TCC and the TPTG are 2 main committees that make recommendations to the MTB. And then we have some other committees as well. Some of them are federally mandated, such as the Congestion Management Process, or CMP Committee. Every large metro area, of which Albuquerque is considered a large metro area, we're a TMA. We have over 200,000 people in the urban area. As a matter of fact, we're over 900,000, so we're a large TMA. We must have a congestion management process. We also have to have an ITS committee, Intelligent Transportation System Committee. ITS is using modern technology to increase the efficiency and make the most of your existing infrastructure. It's everything from traffic signals to those big digital message board signs that you see that say, traffic accident ahead, use alternate route. That's all part of ITS, along with some things I'm going to get into that would impact the future when we get to autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles. Keep in mind that the local officials, all these committees here are staffed by your employees at the city, the county, and other agencies. And so it is important that any direction from city council, county commission, or other officials need to be filtered down so that the committee members are doing what you want them to do. That is a very important thing to understand. So obviously, if we're going to put a transportation plan together, we need to look into the future. And obviously, one of the things that if we're going to look into the future, two of the most important things are how many people are going to be living here and how many jobs are there going to be in this area. So let's go to the next slide. And this is where the big change comes from any policymaker or decision maker in this metro area. If you look at this chart, you will see from 1940 to 2016, the population has grown, and we are still growing. But look at the orange line. The orange line is the pace of that growth. Although we're still growing, the pace of the growth has decreased. It decreased dramatically. We are now to the point where the growth is very minimal. Go to the next one. Where do we get these projections from? We work with the University of New Mexico Office of Geospatial and Population Studies. They are the only entity in the state of New Mexico that puts population projections together. They're the source of socioeconomic data for the entire state of New Mexico. So when you look at this, what happened to our forecasts over time? Obviously, if you go back to one slide, if you were to look at historical trends, which is one of the things demographers do, they look at historical trends, you would see that there's a big increase. And you're going to look at that pace of growth. But, now go to the next slide. But if you look at what's happened, when we put the current MTP together originally, we were looking at those historical trends. It was put together just the meat of it was put together before the recession, and we had a much higher growth rate. Now, however, we know that the growth rate has gone down, although we are still anticipating more people coming into the region. It is much lower than as expected. So what we look at, we are now looking with the current projections using UNM's geospatial group. We are looking at 194,000 more people in the metro area between now and the year 2040. And it seems kind of strange to say the year 2040, but we're talking more than 20 years in the future. And we are looking about 120,000 of them will be in Bernalillo County. The rest down in Valencia County in the Los Lunas area. As you know, there's a lot of things going on with Facebook, and some up in the Rio Rancho, Sandoval County area. But obviously the lion's share of the 194,000 anticipated population increase will be in Bernalillo County. And the reason for the low amount of population increase is we are now at a historic low in this metropolitan area for birth rates and in migration. This is the lowest it has ever been in the metropolitan area since the statistics have been kept. So where do we expect those people to go? Well, obviously we have 194,000 people. They're going to go somewhere. So if you look at the map up there, you will see some blue areas. The darker the blue, the more population density. Now again, we're not talking a huge increase. Over a 20-year period, only 194,000 people. So you're going to have some increased density in some of the areas east of the river, and you can see a few of those blue areas on the west side of the river have also gotten denser. And where are the jobs going to go? Now, again, 194,000 people. At the moment, we're not anticipating, I don't have the exact numbers on the jobs, but those will be all part of the metropolitan plan. But if you look at those red dots representing jobs, you will see that even in the year 2020 or 2040, we are still expecting the majority of the jobs to be east of the river, which means we will continue to have the problems on river crossings. So, but we have some possible solutions to help mitigate some of that. So as our communities grow, the federal government throughout the country, throughout the nation, communities are growing. The federal government has encouraged through the 3C process and the various transportation bills that fund transportation, they have encouraged scenario planning. And we have already made a head start on that. So let's take a look at what we call the target scenario and what we mean by scenario planning. So the federal government is asking metropolitan areas to look at a couple things. We have two areas here. We have a trend scenario and a target scenario. A target scenario, a trend scenario is looking at how the region would develop if we continue with all the policies in place that we have today. Policies being subdivision regulations, comprehensive plans, current zoning, and so on. A target scenario would be looking at, well, what would it be like if we made a few adjustments to the comprehensive plan and some of the zoning and where we want to target that development. That's what the target scenario is, just that. Where do you want to target the development? So where do we get this information from? Next one. It is a collaborative process. We don't sit in isolation as an MPO and say, oh, we want it to do this. No, what we do is we work with all the various governments within the metropolitan area and look at, for example, as you know, the city of Albuquerque has done the comprehensive ABC to Z effort and some zoning changes. We incorporate those zoning changes into our target scenario because some of those changes implement our target scenario, and sometimes we have to change the target scenario to implement what the local government has in their plans. We do the same for Bernalillo County in their comp plan. The city of Rio Rancho is in the process now of updating their comprehensive plan to change some of what they're doing to meet our current target scenario, and now we are in the process of updating this MTP, and we are in turn going to tweak our target scenario to match what all of our member governments are doing. The same is happening down in Valencia County. Some of you may have seen the news where the village of Los Lunas is looking to put in a development near the rail runner station that would be a mixed-use development down there, that we're taking that. It's not which one came first. It's both. It's a collaborative effort. So what we do at the MPO and what the local governments do together do in their area, it's a collaborative effort. The target scenario coordinates land use and transportation planning. It prioritizes existing infrastructure, which of course we can do because of our low growth rate that we're expecting. We can really focus some of our transportation dollars on the existing infrastructure and then really be strategic of where we want to expand our infrastructure. We also want to invest in activity centers. We want to look at a balance between housing and jobs on the east and west of the river. As you notice, when we look at where the jobs are going to be, they're still going to be primarily east of the river. But what we can do, and what your plans are doing, the city of Albuquerque, Bernalillo County, and Rio Rancho, they're also targeting certain centers, activity centers west of the river to give people some opportunities who live on the west side to also work on the west side to avoid and minimize and help mitigate some of the river crossing areas. But we want to give people options as well. This is not about turning everything into a new urbanist type thing. This is to give people options so people have the opportunity to decide, do you want to live in an urban environment? Do you want a rural environment? Do you want a suburban single-family home environment? We need to provide all those opportunities to also encourage future jobs coming into the Albuquerque area and to also accommodate our residents that are currently here and the children who are someday going to grow up and become adults and looking for jobs and looking for homes to live in themselves. So, but why? Why do we need to do this? Is it just because we want to be nice and give everybody opportunities? Well, that is a nice altruistic reason to do that. That's nothing wrong with that. But there's also some very practical reasons as well. When you look at this chart, you can see the blue is the trend scenario, the orange represents the target scenario. In every case, the target scenario outperforms the trend scenario. If you're looking at vehicle miles traveled, there's less vehicle miles traveled under the target scenario. When you look at river crossings, there's less river crossings of the future growth in the target scenario. All the way down. It also affects quality of life issues as well. And in my age, sometimes the little printouts come out too slow, too small. But the point is, it outperforms all of the trend scenario. Now, again, I don't want to give you any illusions that all of a sudden our river crossing problems are going to disappear when we implement the target scenario. No, that's not going to happen. But what it does mean is, compared to two different ways to accommodate those 194,000 people, the target scenario always, in every case, outperforms. It gives us less people trying to cross the river than it would if we did the trend scenario. So what are we doing with this update? What's new? As we continue to tweak our scenarios, we're making our changes to accommodate the changes that Bernalillo County, Albuquerque, Rio Rancho, Los Lunas have put into their comp plans. And we're looking and projecting out 20 years. What is different about this MTP development than what has occurred in the past? And the first one is the passage of MAP 21 and the FAST Act. Congress passed the two transportation bills, which established national performance goals, which are on the right-hand side, the national performance goals on safety, efficiency and mobility, maintaining the existing infrastructure, reducing congestion, enabling freight movement, maintaining environmental and improving environmental resiliency, and reducing project delivery delays. In other words, when you actually fund a project, trying to reduce the delays that it takes to get a project on the ground. We have taken, on the left-hand side, we have that chart that shows our four MTP goals. So we have taken the federal mandated national goals and integrated them into our 4 goals. This is something we have to do because as an MPO and as elected officials, Congress is telling you and telling all of us we must implement those national performance goals. So some of the things we're trying to do, we're looking long range. Keep in mind that you have an MTP, which is the long-range plan, and those of you who are on the Metropolitan Transportation Board are also aware we have something called the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. Long-range plan, 20 years out. TIP, short-range, 6 years. That is the listing of projects that will receive federal funds in the next 6 years. Your TIP projects must be consistent with your metropolitan transportation goals. Our goals must be consistent with the national goals. So this is how the federal government is assuring that projects that are funded with federal dollars are going to implement the national goals. So again, projects funded the TIP must in turn implement the national performance goals. Funding for infrastructure is limited. As you all know, we have a problem with infrastructure in this country. We only have so much money, and both at the state level and at the national level, there's been much discussion about how to fund the transportation infrastructure. I'm still waiting for some resolution on some of that, but in the meantime, we do have limited infrastructure funding. So one of our goals, and the national goal, is to preserve the infrastructure. This is also one of the clarifying points that as we put our MTP list together, and I'm telling you this so that you're aware of what we're doing as we put the list of projects for the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, when we put them together, we have to look way 20 years down the future. For example, if you are to drive across the Montano Bridge, Central Avenue Bridge, the I-40 bridge over the Rio Grande, they're all in great shape. I guarantee you that between now and 2040, each one of those bridges will have to have some sort of rehab project, which means that we have to look at all the funding that comes into this metro area, not just federal. The financial plan I put together must include local dollars from the quarter-cent tax that's here in this area, must include any state dollars that go in. We have to make sure that we are programming an estimated amount of money to cover those rehabs that'll be done in the next 20 years. So it's not just like a brand new road, just repaved. Well, within 20 years, that's going to have to be redone. Those are the kind of things we have to keep looking 20 years down the future in. So it's also making sure that we do preserve the infrastructure. We have to look for an improved efficiency of the system as well. And another very, very major change is safety. This map is showing you the high fatality and injury network for Albuquerque. For those of you who are not aware, New Mexico as a state and Albuquerque as a region is among the highest in the nation for accident rates and fatalities. Said that we are a focus city for the Federal Highway Administration. So we need projects that are going to address that area. Autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles is a big unknown as we're putting the Metropolitan Plan together. One of the things, the main thing to do here, yes, we all know about autonomous vehicles. Don't expect to have a self-driving car in the next year. There are a lot of parts of partially automated vehicles that will happen. There's a lot of things that have to be overcome before we can ever get to that point. Where we have self-driving vehicles. Just to have your staff stay informed and make sure as traffic signal technology, et cetera, are purchased, make sure it's compatible with AV and automated vehicle and connected vehicle technology. We also look beyond 20 years, a little glimpse beyond the 20 years with our long-range transportation system. And looking at we call it LRTS, the long-range transportation system, looking at those things that we would like to do, but we know it's beyond the 20-year time frame. And then we look and see what things we might like to do should we ever start growing again. So public agency, we already had our meetings. This chart is showing where public and your agency staff thought we should put our investment money in, and one of the major areas was preserving the existing infrastructure. Not surprising. So I'm going to summarize the next couple slides. Key points here for you to take. If you don't get anything else out of this presentation, if I didn't put you to sleep yet, please take these things home. We are growing at a slower rate than previously expected, slower than we ever have since 1940, which means we have to look at things differently. We're not at that fast growth. We have limited funding for transportation projects. The MTP must be fiscally constrained, which means the projected revenues cannot exceed the projected costs of all the projects, which is why sometimes when somebody wants a project in, we have to say, there's no money for it. I'm so sorry. We have to preserving the existing infrastructure is both a national and regional priority, and the target scenario was approved by the MTB, Metropolitan Transportation Board, provides a more efficient use of transportation funding, and we need to plan for an integrated network of all modes that increases safety, efficiency, and mobility. So with that, I'd say thank you, and the contact information is right up there, so most of you know how to contact me. We also have for the public a general email set up. It's called MTP Comments at Mr. Cog. That's Mr. Cobb's email address. So at that point, if you have any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
Commissioner O'Malley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned the guidelines or they're coming from the federal government around this. So mean, those aren't necessarily going to, how long has some of the requirements been in place? Because things could change, right? I mean, it's congressional decision that's coming down.
Yes, this is, since both MAP 21 and the FAST Act had the same goals in them. What they did, they passed them with MAP 21 in 2013, and it was continued, and it was a bipartisan movement for both of them. Keep in mind that when they passed them in MAP 21, the FAST Act strengthened them. Well, I can't anticipate anything from Washington right now, so I will have to say that going on historical trends, I would expect the next transportation bill to probably strengthen them even more. Now, that's not to say that it could totally change, but I would have to say I would not expect them to go away, because that was a bipartisan effort that put those national goals in place. At the moment, there are no penalties involved with not meeting those goals yet. There are a couple that will kick in, mostly on the state level, but keep in mind whatever kicks in on the state level just flows downhill, will kick in on the state level in the future.
The other thing is, what you're saying is you've just laid over the zoning that, for example, the latest changes in the zoning, the IDO, for example, is that already laid on top of this?
Yes, with the update that we're doing, we are incorporating all the changes from the IDO and from other local governments' changes in their zoning ordinances and comp plans. We're incorporating whatever changes you have made into our target scenarios.
And those are integrated through our land use models and travel demand models. So we're taking that into consideration in those environments.
Well, as we know, people don't always act the way that we think they're going to act or we want them to act. They're looking at, for a lot of folks, sometimes they're looking at affordability for people who are looking at a home. And sometimes it's, a lot of times it's not in the interior of the city because it's too expensive or whatever. So there's just a lot of different factors that affect growth, as we know. And the other thing is, how often do you update? Are you looking at data yearly?
We do look at the data yearly. We normally, like I said, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan gets updated every 5 years. But in between, if something drastic changed, we can do a Metropolitan Transportation Plan amendment. In this current Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the one that's existing right now called Futures 2040, we did do an administrative modification to the Metropolitan Plan, which lowered the population forecast. We did that in September of 2017, and it went before the board. We did that because what we wanted to avoid were agencies. When you are designing a roadway project, for example, this came up with their interchange project at Rio Bravo that the DOT was designing. You have to look at the population projections and the current MTP, because whatever you're designing has to be consistent with the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So if we didn't want DOT or any other agency designing for a population that is not going to happen in 20 years. So that would have, if we hadn't done that, that would have meant they would have over-designed a project and spent money on extra things in the project, extra ramps or whatever it might be that isn't necessary. So that's why we did that administrative modification. So we do it on a 5-year basis, but we can do something in between should something unusual happen, like that was.
I thought there was more growth that was happening over there off the Rio Bravo. Isn't that the case? Isn't that the case with the Rio Bravo intersection, that there's actually more growth that's projected in that area?
Yes, but with the population, the old population projections that were higher, they would have had to, that current $65 million project would have been more in the $85 to $100 million range.
Thank you.
Councilor Pena, and then Councilor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, I think you guys do an awesome job, but I do like to give you heck once in a while because I do get concerned over our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, just because, you know, obviously I was elected to represent the west side, you know, and there's always some contentious with some kind of future development that's proposed for the area. But right now, we're feeling the squeeze as we speak. So when I look at this plan and we've had the discussion, you know, I see it as an urban plan, yet, and we talk here about some of the growth that we're having and the trend and the population growth, but yet the information that I have in terms of the population growth, it tends to be on the west side of Albuquerque, and it feels like we're not accommodating that growth, whether it's a slower pace or a faster pace. I mean, it seems as though lots of the infrastructure needs that we have throughout the city are important, but if we don't put in the infrastructure necessary for some of the open space and the vacant parcels that we have on the west side, then we're going to continue to have this conundrum with the river crossing. So, you know, we talk, and we've had people, I mean, I have people talk about, you know, when Amazon, you know, we can bring them to the west side. We really don't have that infrastructure in place to be able to accommodate someone like an Amazon. So we're really not prepared for that level, although I know we focus on local businesses, and that's important as well. But in order to have a thriving economy and so that our trend doesn't go down, we really need to look at those things as a city, and especially, I believe, at Mr. Cog, that we have to address that. You know, I don't know if these numbers take into effect the Netflix and the movie industry. I mean, that's according to everything we're hearing, that's really going to be a total boom for the area. Obviously, that's the other side of the river, but that's obviously going to create opportunities for the city as a whole, you know. And I know we talk about this relief route on the west side, and I know there's some contention with it because, you know, putting in that additional infrastructure when, you know, we have aging infrastructure in the core of the city, I know there's always this tug of war, but, you know, we're dying on the west side, you know, and we have our schools that are overcrowded. You look east of the river, and many of those schools aren't overcrowded like we are on the west side. So we're actually in need of another high school, another middle school. We have a Trisco Heritage. I think it was made to house 2,000 high school students. I think we're at 2,600, 2,700, you know. And so when I hear this, and when you hear me sounding kind of anxious and really wanting our voices to be heard on the west side, that's part of it. So as we move forward with Mr. Cog, you know, I just really hope that we look at those issues that we have. So without me just going on and on, you mentioned that there are ideas for river crossings. You didn't mention what they were. Can you kind of just give me an idea of what some of those ideas are?
As far as river crossings, with the exception of the Los Lunas River Crossing Corridor, which Valencia County is actively working to putting a funding plan together to actually pay for that river crossing. I would not anticipate any new river crossings in the area. Keep in mind that in order for any project to go into the Transportation Improvement Program, or the MTP, a member agency, who is a lead agency to develop the project, must propose it.
Yeah.
So at this point, as far as the river crossings, to increase.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to stop you right there because actually I probably didn't pose the question correctly. You were actually speaking about ideas for river crossings, not to build additional bridges, but ideas about alleviating the river crossing need.
Absolutely. As you were correct, much of that growth, population growth, will occur on the west side. So it's also looking at where in the west side are we going to target the development. As you all know, there's an area called Volcano Heights that is an approved subdivision that if some of the growth is targeted in that area, that allows for some of those residents and some of the businesses that will go there to be served by transit. Same with the area which is, it used to be the SunCal development and Westland. Estrella. No, not
Santa Lena.
Santa Lena on the south side, but the one north of I-40. Used to be the old SunCal property. Some of that is being developed, is proposed to start some of the development. Some of that area will target, if we can target some development there, that again, that provides opportunities to provide transit for some of that area, to selectively improve roadway expansions where it's necessary. For example, in the Volcano Heights area, and I know a project that is likely going to be funded in this current TIP development, is making Unser Boulevard a consistent 4-lane where it narrows down to 2 as you approach Paseo del Norte. That has a pretty good chance of being funded. I can't say for sure because we're in the middle of that process. But targeting our expansion of capacity to roadways like that where it's going to have a big impact, where it really helps to minimize and reduce congestion along a road such as Unser and Paseo del Norte in that area. So it's kind of where you target that development on the west side.
I wanted to say something.
Well,
Doug, go
yeah, Councilor Davis.
Well, let me just get back to a little off topic here for a minute. Mr. Bernalillo, you mentioned right as we got started, sort of that now that we're out of the carbon dioxide sort of challenge, that we can go to a longer-term planning process. It's been a couple of years since I was on MTV, but whatever happened with our CMAQ funding there? There was a time when we got CMAQ funding directly here because of our ozone and our carbon and our air quality issues. But it was left, sort of when I left, sort of up to what do we do about that, because it gave the state more discretion on where to focus those dollars. Where is that, and how has that affected sort of our long-term funding plan?
I'll go ahead and I can explain that one. When we were in nonconformity and then later on in what was called limited maintenance for carbon monoxide, the federal government distributes CMAQ funds. CMAQ stands for Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Funds. It comes down from the federal government to the state. Then the state, if there is an area of limited maintenance or nonconformity, the state is mandated to distribute some of that money to those areas. So we were getting what was called CMAQ mandatory because the state was mandated to give us some of that CMAQ funding for programming. And then El Paso, there's a little bit of El Paso's MPO that comes into New Mexico. They got a little. So with us now no longer in limited maintenance, and we're fully compliant with carbon monoxide, the irony is when you clean up your air, the federal government takes away the mandatory funds. So now the state of New Mexico, it's part of their CMAQ pot of money that they can distribute throughout the state. Given that, however, we had already programmed CMAQ funds in 2017, 18, 19, 20, and 21. Some of it, much of it all of it in the Albuquerque area. We had how would I put this, a disagreement with the New Mexico Department of Transportation, but that we have since resolved that through our federal certification review process, and we have come to an agreement that the funds, the CMAQ funds that were programmed back in 2016 when we were still in limited maintenance can stay programmed. In the future, any CMAQ funds that any agency in this area requests has to go through the New Mexico Department of Transportation's application process. Now, that said, I will tell you, because we are the largest metropolitan area, and CMAQ is a category of funding that you can't just use anywhere. You can't build another lane on a road with CMAQ funds. You can only use it to something that is going to either mitigate congestion or improve air quality. So given that, and we're the largest metropolitan area, much of that CMAQ money will likely come to the metropolitan area and some of the smaller metro areas as well.
All right, thank you. Commissioner O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In following up on the question of the issue with the west side, and what has been happening over the years is just retrofitting. Development occurs, schools get built, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, we're going to have to address the road situation or transportation situation, which has also made it very difficult to do any kind of transit because of the roadways. And so there has been unfortunately, there has been a lot of needs over there that have not been addressed. And it's just getting worse in some cases because we end up with a situation where it's just desperate. All of a sudden, intersections or roadways are at grade F and they're not functioning. And so it's like this desperate need to try and fix something. And we got to get better at this because this is not the way to address that situation. And I think that brings us back to where, growth occurs. And we may say, well, we would like growth to occur here, but it's occurring in other areas, and we have to accept that and be ready to plan it. And that's one of the reasons too that the county has prioritized the Chusca Vista extension because that's a road that basically just stopped. I don't know if you cared about it. It's the road where the airport is. That's the road where the factory is. There's all this property that's ready for commercial development, and it just stopped. So when I saw that, I thought, why aren't we finishing this road, for example? Because it can mean actually more development, more commercial development. So, those are my concerns, and I can understand the frustration that folks feel, particularly on the west side. I mean, not just crossing the river, which is very challenging, but just navigating within or in the west side. It's not easy.
And I just also want to give you a little bit of perspective because all of your comments are absolutely correct. We have growth on the west side. We have some needs that are not being met on the west side. Just to put it in perspective, of the fund sources that come into this metropolitan area, there's quite a bit that pretty much stays with DOT because in order to maintain Interstate I-40, I-25, Paseo del Norte, and Coors Boulevard, which are theirs, and 528, those fund sources, that takes up most of what's called NHPP and STP Flex fund sources. What we get primarily is Surface Transportation Large Urban Funds, or STPU funds. We only get about $20 million a year. And I know that sounds like a lot because each one of us would love to have $20 million a year to spend. However, just to give you a perspective, the Rio Bravo Interchange project is a $55 million project. So just keep that in perspective. We like to, sure, 20 million is a lot, but when it comes to roadway projects, 20 million is unfortunately does not stretch as far as we'd like it to stretch. And the river crossing in Los Lunas that they're trying to fund, they've actually passed a bond. The Valencia County voters passed a bond to help pay for that. That is a $95 million project. If we were to build it at today's dollars, that's $95 million just for that one river crossing. So it kind of puts it in perspective. And that doesn't include the costs of what will eventually have to happen to improve the roads that the traffic is going to be put on the east end of it as well. So I'm just trying to put it in perspective. That's one of the challenges we all have. We have at the MPO to propose things to the board that you find acceptable and that you have in trying to decide what gets funded when you have such limited transportation dollars. So,
Commissioner Harris.
Thank you. One of the things I'm concerned about and have been, and it seems to be like pushing on a rope, is the development of East Central. And one thing, for people who might be watching or for others, what I learned with the art project is that, and tell me if you know more about this than me, is that one of the reasons why that was able to be developed the way it was with the nice white sidewalks and the lights is because of a certain kind of federal dollars.
That's correct.
But if we didn't have those certain kind of federal dollars, we have a very unique situation on East Central, and there are two county commissioners up here, Pistoki and Hart Stebbins, as well as me and Pat Davis, counselors, who represent that area. And I understand the sidewalks are unusual in that they are not part of the city right-of-way. Is that correct?
That would actually, that's a city question because it could vary from one piece of property to the next. I know that is the case in certain areas. I don't know how extensive that is on East Central. You are correct that the fund source that paid for the art project was unique in that it was a special grant from the Federal Transit Administration that could only be used for the construction of the art project. It could not be transferred to any other transit project for the city, and it couldn't go geographically anywhere else as well. But as far as the sidewalks go on East Central, there are some opportunities on East Central for expansion of that. But the sidewalks, that is actually a question I would suggest that the Department of Municipal Development answer, because it's going to vary from one section to the next.
But what I understood is that because it was federal transportation money, we could actually go in and rip up the sidewalks, make them wider, put the lights on there, and then sort it out later. But if we were going through state highway money or municipal or city or county money, then we'd have to go like sort of block by block and negotiate with each property owner. And
I think it's reversed, the other way around.
Okay, so tell me about that.
The federal government generally has far more restrictive right-of-way procedures than a state or local government. Both, however, do have overriding overall rules that you cannot violate somebody's personal property rights. It's very hard to speak in generalities because I find it hard to understand how all those sidewalks or many of the sidewalks in East Central could not be in the public right-of-way, but they also could be through easements. And because you can have a public right-of-way that the city owns, or you can have a public right-of-way that the city has a public right-of-way easement for a sidewalk. If it's an easement, you can go ahead and rebuild the sidewalks and make them ADA compliant. But that really is something that the city's right-of-way division and the Department of Municipal Development would have to answer, and it's really almost on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, because what the folks, I guess it was the city who told me, is that it's much harder to do that kind of improvement with the nice white sidewalks and the lights and all that stuff if you're not dealing with the FTA money. And that if you're dealing with state money and a state process, that it's a little more cumbersome. But that's not your understanding?
I'd have to really understand I'd have to actually understand what the problem was at a location to answer that. So I can't, it's hard for me to speak in generalities because there could be a situation where the city may have its own regulation that is stricter than the federal government. It is possible. And it has happened before. So but without knowing what exactly the city has in place along East Central, I'd have a hard time answering that question.
And also understood we could potentially get some state money or maybe federal money just by dedicating, even if we don't have a separate BRT facility like we do west of Louisiana, I guess it is. Mm-hmm. But if you go east of Louisiana, just by dedicating lanes, we could potentially get some money coming.
If let's say there's 3 lanes each direction,
yep.
If let's say the curb lane was dedicated for a bus for transit, then that if it's a dedicated guideway, that should increase the number of miles of guideway in the federal formula that distributes federal transportation dollars, transit dollars. There's a category of funds called, it's a long story, 5307 funds, and it's formula driven, and part of the formula is how many miles of guideway, dedicated guideway to transit you have. So the ART project with the dedicated lanes now gives you a certain amount of money because of the length, it's about 10 miles there, give or take, of dedicated guideway. Adding on to that would increase that. And you'd have to actually look at the formula, the transit department would have to look at the formula to actually determine what that increase would actually be.
But is it possible that we could, let's say, dedicate from Louisiana up to Tramway, which would be Louisiana, Wyoming, Eubank, that's 5 miles. Mm-hmm. And could we actually use that money, potentially bond on it? You know?
You would get more money. Can you use it to bond? I think so, but I'd have to really double check that. I don't want to say yes or no because I'd really have to double check that answer.
And I saw you have, it looks like in your long range plan, you look at East Central all the way up to Tramway as a BRT eventually.
Yeah, it's a premium transit corridor. What that would be, and I know the ART project, the buses will continue when we get them running, they're supposed to continue into the tramway, to tramway as well.
Okay. And one more thing in terms of people who, because I try to explain this to folks and they don't really believe me, but I understand, is it your understanding that from Louisiana up to tramway that we actually perhaps have too much capacity in terms of the lanes compared to what we'll ever need?
We can go with our transit, we have a travel demand model, which is for those of you who don't know, it's a computer program, very expensive. Every metropolitan area must have a travel demand model. We have a travel demand model that we use to look at, for example, let's say the city were going to come to us and say, we want to take a lane each direction. We run a travel demand model to make sure that the existing lanes that remain are able to handle not only today's capacity, but the projected capacity 20 years from now. And given what I know about the traffic counts on their volumes on East Central, I would say at this point it does appear that we would be able to actually take a lane in each direction. But we'd have to verify that with a travel demand model run and really want to analyze it before you make a total, on one decision one way or another.
I know, this is something that Councilor Davis and I have been talking about getting together on, so I think it's probably time. Thanks for coming. It's been a very interesting presentation.
And we'd be more than happy to give you the information that you need to make that decision. So please just contact my office. We can do those travel demand model runs or anything else you need to help you out, make your decision. That's what we're there for.
Okay, thanks.
I may add, if there's any confusion, it seems like there may be a little bit of confusion on the process, or if we can clarify some things, we'd be more than happy to sit down with any one of our board members, maybe even provide a workshop, a training. That way we can get some maps out, review some of the stuff in-house, and provide some actual training for everybody. We wouldn't mind doing that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you so much. I just have one real quick comment. I think a lot of it has been covered by the other members here. I just, I worry about, putting in where you have on this one graph where it's public and agency investment priorities, where you've got input from the community, and I could probably guarantee you that most of the people who put the input on this, from the business owners to the residents, were on the other side of the river, just because we're limited already on one side of the river. And I want you to just be, keep that in mind, that when you look at these kinds of statistics, who's putting into those statistics. And look, I definitely, even though I represent the west side, we want to make sure that we maintain our infrastructure throughout the whole city. I wouldn't want to take away from the other.
Absolutely.
But I'm just saying that I can probably pretty much, just even you giving me the map with all the dots where everybody is, it's pretty, it's pretty specific that that's where you got most of that data from. And so.
On this chart right here, this orange black one, the orange blue one.
Yeah, it's this big one here where you have.
Yes,
Yeah.
that was actually what we did. Do not take that whole chart as if it's, what we took a vote from everybody in the whole metro area. What it is, of the people that appeared at the 3 public meetings, one was held in Rio Rancho, one was held in Los Lunas, and one was held in the South Valley. So of the 3 public meetings we had thus far, what we did was to show where you invest. Everybody, and then we did an agency one with agency staff, everybody got beans, and you had only so many beans, and you had little jars. Where do you think that if you only have so many, where would you like to put them?
So, yeah, and I understand that, but I want to know, I want you to know that there's a distinct difference between the South Valley and the Southwest Mesa.
Absolutely.
And the West Mesa and Rio Rancho.
Oh, absolutely.
But I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much.
We'll go on to item A, continuing the Behavioral Health Initiative, action and discussion. So this is Katrina Holtram. I know I made you go all the way up there and sit down and then limp all the way back, so I apologize for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What we're going to do today is just give you a brief update of where we are financially with the Behavioral Health Initiative, and we're just going to give you an overview. But I would like to tell you about a couple of things that we've been working on just really quick. We have been working on, we actually got an RV wrap. We call her Bertha. It does stand for something. It stands for the Behavioral Health Assessment and Triage, what is it? Assessment and triage and assessment automotive.
or automobile. And so we are getting Bertha out. The first time that we will get her out will be at Wells Park on February 12th. The plan is to get Bertha in with our community engagement teams to get her out early in the morning to do needle pickup with our community engagement teams to see if we can do more in-reach with both the homeless community and behavioral health populations. We plan on partnering with the city of Albuquerque to do that. More to come as soon as I meet with Carol to talk more about that. But we did get an RV donated to us from Bernalillo County Fire, and we came up with that fantastic name. So more to come on that, but it's great. Another great way that we partner with the city to get some stuff done. All right, and in addition, I think Commissioner Piscotti, I think you'd asked about the next housing subcommittee meeting, and that is going to be February 13th at 5:30 p.m., and we've already emailed that to the last speaker. And then we're just going to go ahead and give you a brief update on our status to date on our behavioral health initiative financially. So that I'm going to turn it over to Fran Martinez-Romero.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, members of the Commission, thank you for having us here this evening. I thought that as we near the end of our annual tax dollars of about $20 million a year, we thought we'd give you an update on what these spends look like. So to date, are we up just yet? Go ahead. Not quite, okay. You have your hard copies right in front of you, and under the current allocation of the gross receipts tax, you're going to see the program or the project, the committee in which proposed and approved that project, and you're going to see the allocations by recurring and non-recurring dollars. So to date, we have approximately 18.9 of recurring projects, and on non-recurring, we're looking at about 35.8 million. The Behavioral Health Initiative to date has created 18 projects and earmarked approximately 93% of the annual tax dollars. With that said, we have approximately $1 million remaining in recurring funds. Again, that's based on a $20 million annual budget, and approximately $14 million remaining in non-recurring funds. Pending projects to date include, our multifamily single-site supportive housing project, adult transitional living, and living room model sites, both of which include recurring and non-recurring dollars. I stand for any questions that you may have or comments.
Any questions? Any comments? No?
I intended to be brief in
No, that was good.
consideration
Thank
of
you.
your time.
Thank you so much. And we could take this home as something to read later if we need it. All right?
To put you to sleep, right?
No. No. This is very important, so I think we
Great.
all take this very serious, and so we thank you so much.
Thank
for
you. We
your work.
appreciate your support.
So we will go to item 2,
Mr.
is
Chairman,
opportunities.
I just have one question before you go.
Okay.
So a while back, I thought we appropriated some funding for sober living. Is that on here? For short, like 3 to 6 month transitional living?
Commissioner Hurst-Evans, it's identified in that list under the short-term housing vouchers, and the short-term housing voucher is a larger number that is specific to sober living, motel vouchers, and additional needs.
Mr. Chair, it's the last item on this list right here.
Under your current allocation of the gross receipts tax, transitional housing vouchers.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to the opportunities of subcommittees to address the commission. Where we don't have that?
Mr. Chair, they tapped out.
They tapped out?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's fine. Then we'll go to a report of the City of Albuquerque Behavioral Health Initiative. Carol Pierce to present.
Hi, thank you, Chairman Casada. Yes, I've got an update, want to cover about 4 different items. Would love to let everybody know that the City of Albuquerque did receive a SAMHSA grant recently, and that was for about $3.7 million. We're really excited about that. I mentioned it at a prior meeting, but and we've got a new board member. So this is a program that will work closely with the Second Judicial Court and UNM, and this is to divert a population where somebody might have severe mental health issues, may have some drug issues as well, And it is to help these folks so they don't end up in jail or hospitalized, that they will have intensive supportive treatment, and they will be vetted to make sure they're appropriate for this kind of service. So what this grant pays for, it pays for some judicial court help, as well as the team of people from UNM, case managers, et cetera. And right now, we anticipate this will go to the Albuquerque City Council for approval February 4th. And right now, the Second Judicial Court says they have about 60 cases right now of folks that would just be ready to go for this. So I think this is a win for our community. We're really excited about it, and we'll keep you posted as we go forward. The other thing I wanted to let you know is in our RFP cycles, we recently led an RFP before the holidays, and that included for homeless programs and several behavioral health. And just to give you the really big picture, for homeless programs and initiatives, everything from really helping with emergency shelter for adult and youth victims of domestic violence and supportive housing and case management. We led about 2.5 million out in the community to community agencies. They're just now getting that information, and we'll be meeting with those folks to negotiate those contracts. For behavioral health and wellness, about 1.4 million, and that's for outreach, prevention, intervention for children and adolescents, treatment for victims of domestic violence, our teen service center programs, and supportive housing with case management. And lastly, I believe I mentioned this before, we did something a little new this year, and it was really learning from the county how they did a problem-based RFP, which we really thought that was a great idea. But we know, I think we all know as a community, that one of the gaps are often kids aging out of foster care and or the juvenile justice system. So one of our new RFPs for $400,000 was to look at that gap in care, and we awarded a contract for that as well. So a total of $4.3 million. We're excited to really bring these new services online as of July 1st, the new fiscal year. And lastly, I think we've also talked about mobile crisis teams before. This is, again, one of those great joint ventures between the city and the county, because right now we have 4, I think technically 5, because there's one to help when people need to take time off or to make sure we've got everything covered. 2 are at APD, 2 are in the county, and right now we're jointly funding another one, and this will go to APD first. That's been mutually agreed upon, and then the next one would go to the county. And again, this is a model I think where we're realizing to have those clinicians go out with our law enforcement is really working to address big behavioral health concerns in our community. I think that's just been a great collaboration together. Lastly, this really is the last one, I'd always like to just give an update. Our West Side Emergency Housing Center on the west side, where we have our homeless individuals go, continue to see over 300 people there roughly a night. It does vary depending on the weather, but the weather's been pretty cold. We've been working collaboratively with the community on some pickup sites right now. That primarily remains at Coronado. I do want to just give a shout out. Over the holidays in particular, when we had really cold weather, we did some really great work with our partners at The Rock, at HopeWorks, with an agency called Rhubarb and Elliott that helped with food, and with our Albuquerque Fire Department. So they were hauling the food out to the shelter when we didn't want to bring people in. We wanted them to stay warm and dry. And so our partnership with Albuquerque Fire was great. But everybody rallied together, a lot of texts, a lot of going back and forth to just keep people as safe and warm as we can. We happened to meet today to just solidify our plan when that comes up the next time, and we're working on that as well. Lastly, I think everyone knows typically we've closed on March 15th. Historically, as a city, we are not doing that this year. We are making all the plans to keep the West Side Emergency Housing Center open, and that would just continue in the future. We're looking forward to, we hope, success with the state legislature and all our partners for a bond issue to really bring our emergency housing as a starting point here, more centrally located. We're spending a lot of money on transportation, and it's just not as centrally located to really meet the needs of our community. So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? Commissioner?
Any questions, but I'm really pleased to see that you're putting resources in where there's a lot of need, there's no doubt about it. So do you find that there's the capacity out there for the organizations to take this money on and do the work?
Thank you, Commissioner O'Malley, for the question. You're talking about out at our west side?
Well, no, I was actually talking about, these new programs, for example, or funding, the services that you discussed.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner O'Malley, for the clarification on the question. We had a lot of people respond to our RFP. We tried to do a little bit more robust outreach. We're really just trying to make sure the community knows these are RFPs available. We want to hear all the different ideas. We had plenty of choices to really evaluate the RFPs. So I think the simple answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to other business. We did have Kazito Wajenje, who was here earlier, but I think he tapped out. And we were going to discuss the upcoming APS election. So I would like to, take a few minutes to talk about that and how important that is going to be for this community. I think that people need to realize that APS has been funded at the same level since 2009. The capital dollars that we use to build new schools or to maintain 40-year-old schools is very limited. I think that, I sat on the school board for 4 years. I think it's really hard set to speak against this election based on not knowing what they do with the budget and how the money is coming in and how we've been able to build some new schools, maintain some schools, but that has been a challenge. And I think a lot of people, they get mad. They say, well, we want you to use that money to give teachers raises. And so I want to kind of address that on an email that I got, and that you cannot use capital money to give teachers raises, that there are different funding sources and there's stipulations on how you use those funds. So I want the public to be aware of that. And I also want the public to be aware that, as APS, and if anyone knows anything about bonding and being able to hold your bonding capacity, you owning land and owning assets really affects your bonding capacity. And so to actually sell your land as an APS, you hurt your bonding capacity in the future. And so you really hurt the future of how we maintain schools and how we build new schools. And so as a county commissioner, I'm just saying that I support this election, and that I really, really think that you need to look at the overall picture moving into the future. We have schools on the west side that are 400 to 500 students over capacity. And if we don't look at that for the future, as you heard us today, we talked about infrastructure and jobs and all these things that we're having issues on the west side. Schools is going to be a huge, difficult challenge for us to make. So this would help us save some of those capital dollars that we use to build schools and not use that on maintaining schools at this point. Yeah, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I could not disagree with you more. I think the bonding is fine, but from what I know, and even from talking to someone who's either currently or formerly on the Board of Education, Albuquerque Public Schools will not even tell us what land they own or what buildings they own. They're totally untransparent when it comes to that. And bonding capacity has to do with a lot of things, including your assets, total assets, not vacant land. It also is in terms of your debt service and your ability to have serviced your debt in the past. APS has no problem with that, has no problem with the 3 receipts from the state. Any sale of land would have a minuscule effect on their bonding rating and so forth. But, the Albuquerque Public Schools has done horrible things with its capital program. It has spent millions of dollars on Del Norte High School, which has about 1,000 students. There's elementary schools on the west side that have almost that many students. It's just mind-boggling how poorly they have managed their assets, and I think that the voters need to send a message to APS and say, stop. You need to come to us and justify what land holdings do you own, and why don't you sell them? There's 10 acres on the corner of Southern and Eubank that's worth millions of dollars. It's right across from Costco, right outside the gate of Kirtland Air Force Base. They're never, ever going to build a school on that. The notion that they would is crazy. It would be good for the area if that were sold and developed, because that would help redevelop that area. APS isn't interested in that. I've dealt with APS in terms of their real estate division in the past. They're totally unresponsive. They have nuisance properties throughout the city that they're not doing anything with. And so I think that there should be more resources devoted to the west side. And they should sell some buildings on the east side that are empty. That's what they should do. They shouldn't be taxing us. They should justify what the heck they're doing with their assets now before they ask us for tax money. So I totally disagree with the tax increase at this point in time. The last one I actually supported, but I think they're just asking for too much, too often, and I disagree.
Okay. Well, I'm not here to debate you, so we won't go into what bonding capacity is and how you use that. I think we disagree on assets. I think that does come into play. It's come into play here at the county. I think our finance director, Shirley Reagan, could talk about what's important to have asset-wise. But I'm glad that we do agree that we need to keep continuing to build new schools, and that we do need to look at the west side and how we grow that. And it's just. But I think if we look at the long term, that we got to be careful on how and why we need assistance to not use all our capital in one thing. We can disagree on the remodel of Del Norte, but the remodel of West Mesa is a huge success in us. So they're doing right things, and they're not doing some right things that we could debate on. And I think to make the whole district suffer based on a couple of bad decisions, I'm not quite sure. I could support that. So we're going to differ. We'll just, what I think we both would like is for the public to do some research, talk to some people, and try to make their best educated decision on how they move forward to support APS. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Pena. Yeah, I'm not going to call you commissioner, and I'm
know
sorry,
it's tough.
Councilor.
Well, we're kind of all commissioners up here, because this is a commission.
This is a commission.
That's
Okay,
true.
there you go.
Oh, there you go.
All right, I got away with that. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you not to have that debate here on the dais in terms of, people should just really get out and vote. I think it's important to, just show what, it's important to participate in this whole process, whatever side you lie on. I actually just wanted to say that, one of the things that I failed to add to the agenda this month that, I'd like to add to next month is that, we keep having the discussions about APS and they're the elephant in the room, but yet they're not in the room, So I think that it's important to, I actually think it's important to continue that dialogue. I want to commend the commission for voting for APS to have a voice on this seat. Unfortunately, it didn't fare very well at City Hall. I really want to look at it again. I mean, there were some legitimate reasons why people were concerned with it, but I think at minimum, whether advisory or whatever the case may be, I think that we really need to have APS at the table. Any of us, when we're having these dialogues about our students and homeless population, just this morning I heard that there's, or was it here? I mean, I've been such a long day, but there's 4,000 homeless children at APS, and we really need to come together to address that, and we can't do it in these silos, whether it be the city, the county, and APS. So, I'd like to continue that dialogue, and everyone get out and vote.
Thank you. And I think that's super important that they are here. And I tried to do that, and, because I think he has legitimate, I'd like to see what land they have. I'd like them to bring a presentation to us, so, and then that way they could also do a budget presentation, so then we can look at specifically what their budget is, not that we get to tell them how to spend their money, but that we have the knowledge, right, as we move forward on what properties they own, because I'd like to call them out on some properties, right? So if it is something that is going to benefit the city and they're holding onto a property, maybe we can have a discussion together with them. And unfortunately, that's not going to happen because that didn't happen. But maybe if we can relook at that and reconsider how we do bring them here, I think that might be worth some of our time to look at that. Commissioner
I just have a real quick comment. I think there's also a lot of confusion as to the authority of the board. There has to be a better understanding. I guess there has to be more communication between the board and, because I think some folks feel like well, the board ought to do this or the board ought to do that, and then there's a question of, well, they don't have that authority. So it would be helpful to know what authority the board has before we start to just assume that it has certain authorities. So, for example, with the capital program, does the board approve that before it goes out to the voters, just out of curiosity? Or does that is generated, though, by the administration, correct?
It is, but it does go through the Board of Education,
Okay.
and, you know, and so I would love to sit here and ask them those questions. And that's where you go, right? I think that some of the disconnect that we've had with APS is actually working with administration, and we don't have a relationship with the board. And the board is the boss, right, of the superintendent, and then it trickles down. And I think we would be able to mend that kind of relationship with the board. I'm not asking for us to sit two administrators up here, because then we've known, you know, historically we've had some bad feedback of people working with the administration at APS, but we haven't had any kind of a history, or I haven't heard anybody saying, I haven't had a great relationship with a board member from APS. And I was trying to do that, so that's our connect, and that's our way in to look at, you know, how they make these decisions. We would know what the processes are. That was my whole point of doing that. So I appreciate that. And that's what I have this evening. Thank you all so much for showing up. I appreciate it, and I think this meeting is adjourned.